lot of tourists that come through there because they have a national park there. It's called the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And I worked for a summer as a chaplain in the park. And what I did was I had services on Sunday in the ranger station where people were camping overnight, and they would come on Sundays, and they would had service on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and in the afternoon I did a service at the Job Corps Center, which was a training young men who had prison backgrounds and different things in the woods. They were training them with job skills and different things like that, and so I would go over there and have a service with them. But we'd go around to the campsites, and we would just pray for people and that kind of a thing, and minister to the campers while they were there. Some people appreciated it, some didn't, but we always had a good time doing that. Well, one of the things though is that we were not being really paid too much, and so we both had part-time jobs in the city, and I had a part-time job at this wax museum. It was actually a wax museum of the life of Christ, which had different scenes of the life of Christ. So I was being paid to tell the story of Jesus every day, and so that was good. My wife, she worked for this glass blower. You know, this is a resort town, so they got all these tourist trap type things in there. And so she was working for this glass blower, and she started working on the job, and he gave her the line that she was supposed to tell everybody, because he had this little display in the window, and he would work in the window making these little glass figures and little glass objects and stuff, and people would come and watch him in the window. Then they'd come into the store and buy some of these things. And one of the first questions that they would always ask in this shop is, did he make this? You know, or did he make these things? And so when she first got there, he told her, well, when people ask this, when the people ask that, here's your answer, here's your answer, here's your answer. And one of the questions was, did he make everything in the store? The answer is yes, I made everything in the store. Well, that was fine with her because she didn't know any better. And so when it first started, people come in the store, did he make it? Oh, yeah, he made this, he made that, he made the other thing. Well, then, as she'd worked there a few days, and you know, some things got sold, and the shelves started to look a little bare, they started going in the back room and taking some things out of boxes that came from China or some other place, I don't know, in those days, and they put them on the shelf. And so she realized suddenly that, you know, he does not make everything in the store. Some of them come out of that closet, you know. Wherever they come from before that, I don't know. But he doesn't make everything in the store. So she felt bad about telling people a lie. And so she went to him, and she says, I hate to say anything, but, you know, I don't really feel too good about telling people that everything you made in the store, or everything in the store you made, because you really don't. Well, I noticed we've been taking things out of boxes in the closet over there, and you didn't make those, did you? No, I didn't make those. Well, just tell them that I make most everything in the store. Oh, well, okay. So she didn't really know any better that take most everything in the store. Well, then as she worked there a little bit longer, she realized that when the closet got empty, they went in the truck to a warehouse that had boxes upon boxes of things that were not made by him. And then she, again, felt bad because he does not make most everything in the store. So she went back to him again and says, you know what? I just don't even know if I can say that, because now that I've worked here a little while, I realize that you actually make hardly anything that's in the store. You're just doing that stuff in the window, you know, and that I really have a hard time telling people you make most everything in the store. He says, you know what? I just don't think you're going to work out here, you know, and he basically fired her on the spot, and because she would not tell a lie. Now, she didn't obviously change the marketplace in relationship to that. He obviously didn't change his lifestyle. But nonetheless, she was not going to participate. She was not going to participate in sin in the workplace just to make that guy rich. And sometimes we got to bring a different attitude, different understanding. Obviously, she did not start picketing in front of the store. He doesn't make everything in the store, and she could have gone a lot of different ways. But she was willing to put her own self on the line for her personal integrity. And sometimes that's one of the ways you do that. And sometimes it will work for you, and sometimes it will work against you, but at least you can pillow your head at night knowing you did what was right and you were not telling people a lie. So God wants us to do something different in the workplace. He wants us to bring forth something different than what people have commonly had when it comes to this area of life and ministry. So Jesus is our primary example. And just for the sake of the CD, which I know we were running into power issues there again, let me just read through one more time this last section here about Jesus. Jesus had a specific work to do that the Father had designed for him to do. He was the only one that could do it. He had to stay focused in his mission. His mission required discipline and sacrifice. His mission was to do the will of God, to be a living demonstration of the Father to the world, to manifest the power of God, to destroy the works of the devil, and to deal with sin in the workplace. And his mission is not unlike our mission. Jesus is the pattern that we are to follow. Now, Paul is another great example of somebody with a great work ethic. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9 to 12, Paul says this, "For you remember, brethren, our labor and toil. For laboring night and day that we might not be a burden to any of you, we preach the gospel of God. You are also witnesses, and God also, how devoutly and justly and blamelessly we behaved ourselves among you who believe. And as you know, we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you as a father does his own children, that you walk worthy of God who calls you to his own kingdom and glory." Paul says we worked hard. We were hard workers. Sometimes preachers get the reputation for not being hard workers. Of course, a lot of the problem is that people don't understand the true work of ministry, and they say, well, do you do anything besides preach on Sunday and play golf on Monday? No, there's more to the ministry than that. But Paul was one of those guys who wanted to give an example of his own life to people, and he did not get supported by anybody really. The sending church didn't give him any money, and he went out under their authority, but he was not on salary. He raised most of his own finances for the missionary trips that he took in his own tent-making business, and when money ran out, he was in the city. He'd start up another business and work there for a while until the money was there again. Then he'd go travel some more, and then he'd stop for a while, make some money, and a lot of the guys that traveled with him, he supported them as well. So sometimes we think, well, Paul did a lot, but you know what? He also worked real hard. I remember a number of years ago teaching in a pastoral ministry class and talking about the pastor's salary and how much a pastor should make and this kind of thing, and how you would determine that and all this kind of stuff. Well, I had one pastor in the class who was a man from Romania, and he was in the class, and he just kind of raised his hand. He said, well, in Romania, it was, at that time, it's probably different now, but in Romania, the time he was in, it was under the communist rule. He said, no pastor is allowed to get a salary. You have to have another job that the state feels is valuable to them. And that's part of the communist thing. And so he said there isn't one pastor in Romania that gets any money from the church. So what you're saying is that what you do in the church is like a hobby. You got your career over here, and you got to work like a dog just like everybody else, and then you got to come and pastor. And that's kind of the way Paul was. I mean, he was one of those guys that he worked hard to make the living so that he could do the missionary trips, but then he did the missionary work on top of that. And so he saw himself as giving them an example. He's not saying this is what you all need to do. In fact, he was the greatest advocate of people paying their pastors' wages. He was the greatest advocate of all of these things. But he says, I've just deferred this for myself so that I can show you an example of hard work. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10, "But by the grace of God I am what I am, and this grace toward me was not in vain, but I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God was in me." So Paul was another great example of someone who worked hard. There are others in the Bible, Joseph, Nehemiah, Job, Daniel. These guys were people who worked hard. They were people of excellence. They excelled in everything that they did, and you can study any one of their lives and see something beautiful. I listed 4 people, Joseph, Nehemiah, Job, and Daniel, those 4, for a reason, because there's one thing these guys have in common in the Bible. They were all involved in serious work. Many of them were all, Nehemiah, Daniel, and Joseph at least, involved in a lot in secular society as we know it. But these 4 are people in the Bible who did not have one sin recorded against them. Unless you'd think Joseph's sin of kind of sharing his dreams in advance or too early or to the wrong people was maybe at least a bad judgment. But no sins are recorded against him. That's kind of interesting to me because, like David, as much as we like David, he did some bad things. Abraham not much as we like to claim Abraham as our father, he told a few lies, about his sister that he was married to, Couldn't understand why he's sleeping with his sister, but figure that out later, And there were other people that sins were recorded against them, but not these guys. And yet these guys were probably in an environment where sin would have been a lot easier to be involved with, like Daniel, and Nehemiah, who was working in the king's household and so forth, and some of these other guys. But yet they held true. And I think maybe there's a reason why we have these guys that are a great model for us. Joseph, look at his temptation to sin. And, he could have just given in, but no. He'd rather go to jail than compromise his integrity. But God wanted him in jail because that was going to be the pathway to him to get to the throne. If he hadn't been positioned in the jail just right, he wouldn't have got that opportunity that he had. And it's hard to know that when you're sitting in jail. But you have to believe that God's hand's on your life when you stand up for what is right. So we have these great examples of people who use their work in the proper way. Roman numeral 4, in order to work for the right reasons, we must get a vision for our work. We must get a vision for our work. And in this last section here, we just have a few confessions of a person with a vision for his or her work. These are some of your confessions if you are a person who has a vision for your work. Letter A, I am working for God in my business life. I am working for God in my business. I'm not working for that employer. I'm not working for these people. I'm not working for anybody. I am working for God in what I do. As soon as you have that perspective, changes the way you work. Changes the way you work. I mean, I don't care what you do. Whether it's preparing these notes, I'm not doing these for you. I'm doing these for God. I want God to like them. And when you start thinking that way, it changes the way you do things. Letter B, God is going to use me in my business life to extend His kingdom. Now again, we don't often think that. We think kingdom extension, missions, we think that's all church-related stuff. No. Somebody that has a vision for their work has this confession: God's going to use me in my business life to extend His kingdom. I'm not sure how He's going to do it. There's a friend that I have who kind of had been involved in the ministry, but then he was not for a season because there was no sin on his part or anything. It just didn't work out, and so he was part of the church. He took up a business of kind of remodeling and homes and so forth. And he'd worked in a lot of different areas. He'd been a salesman before and different things. And he said one of the things that he felt so great about was that his business required him to be in homes. And he would be in that home for a period of time, sometimes just as short as a couple of days and sometimes as much as a month while they're doing renovations, different things. In the States, you don't have people necessarily moving out and doing renovations. There's a lot of things that you do while people are still living in their homes. So you're interacting with the people in the home for a long period of time. He said, I have such an opportunity to pastor the people that, I got a pastor's heart. I got such an opportunity to pastor the people in that home. I mean, things come up all the time, and I'm able to do various things. And sometimes I'm able to ask, you mind if I pray with you about that? Or you mind if I, tell... and you see needs, and you got opportunities to meet needs, but it's not just kind of a random shotgun method. It's specific people in specific homes in specific places. And he said, I really come to realize that this is my pastorate, is these people that I'm doing work for. Well, again, you have that attitude. You have that. I'm going to extend the kingdom of God through the work that I'm doing. Letter C, another confession of somebody who has a vision, God's vision for their work. I'm going to have the opportunity to touch the lives of others in a significant way through the work that I do. I am going to have the opportunity to touch the lives of others in a significant way through the work that I do. Letter D, another confession of a person who has a vision for their work. The world is going to be a better place because I have touched it by the grace of God. The world is going to be a better place because I have touched it by the grace of God. And finally, the last one, letter E there. God is going to open doors for me that no one else, including the pastor, No one else could walk through. And that's why God has strategically placed us in all these different areas of society and different places that we are. Next time when we talk about God's work and His eternal purpose, we're going to see that even though kind of in this class we're focusing on career, we're focusing on the work that we do, when we really think about what we're saying in terms of God's will for our lives, it really doesn't matter whether you have a job that you get paid for or not. Because even a season of unemployment, you're not unemployed as far as God's kingdom is concerned. Now, you might not be drawing a paycheck from anybody, but unemployment is not a reality in God's mind. That is, you need to be employed doing something. I have not, just because I don't have a job that pays me a paycheck at the end of the month, it doesn't mean that I still don't have this thing called the will of God in my life. And there are things that it doesn't mean that I don't go to work every day. This is where people kind of get into trouble a little bit. Of course, I often tell people if you're unemployed, then your full-time job is looking for work. But you can't look for work every single minute of every day. But you need to realize that every day still needs to be dedicated to God. Every day still needs to be filled with work. And there is a way to work whether you're being paid or not, to serve people and bless others and so forth. And what I have found in my experience is that people who have that mentality won't be without a job for long, because they will make themselves indispensable in some arena by virtue of volunteerism and other things. And they'll say, this guy does more than our employees. We got to do something. We don't want to lose that person. Anyway, we'll talk about that more in our next class. And this is a good stopping point for our break, so we'll take our break and then we'll come back for